Natasha Ballantyne, Humanity-Centered Design, Designing with Vulnerability, Alicamp. Gold sponsors, ANZ, Intopia and Telstra. Silver sponsors, Canva and Coles. Supporters, Rumour, the design recruiter.
All right, I know it is the last talk of the day before we get into closing remarks, but thank you so much for having me back up on the stage. And maybe just a massive round of applause to all the volunteers, amazing people from Intopia, all the sponsors, Alicamp, thank you. It's been an absolutely fantastic conference so far, and I'm so honoured to be here with you today. I thought we'd do something a little bit fun to get us started, get the energy moving, and then we are going to be going into some pretty heavy content. If anyone does need to step out at any point in time, if I go through certain themes in the talk, please feel free to do so. But let's start with a bit of fun first. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side of the room, so the side that is closest to the door. If you're joining us virtually, I want you just to imagine what side of the room you're sitting on, and we're going to do a Mexican wave. Are we ready? All right, so we're starting on the left-hand side. I want you to throw your hands up. You can cheer if you like, you can stand, whatever you like. I'm going to go all the way over to the right-hand side of the room and then all the way back. All right, 3, 2, 1, let's do it. That wasn't too bad. I'm glad I did that exercise because I feel like we needed something there. All right, well, I'm Natasha. Lovely to meet you again. I am a Managing Director at Sign Advisory in our digital transformation practice, and I'm also an expert in residence at Academy XI as their Chief Experience Officer. Before I get into the talk, we've done a bit of a warm-up. I am going to be playing a little bit of a video from someone who I fangirled recently after reading an article on her and asked if I could mention her and the story that she had gone through in this talk. To my surprise, she actually replied. And then I said, oh, can I actually test some themes with you? And then she replied to that as well. And that person is Kariya Khan. So for those that don't know who Kariya Khan is, she was actually invited by the White House to be their senior advisor on disability. She's worked for UNICEF, she's worked for United Nations, she's absolutely phenomenal. She's worked in over 16 different countries in order to advocate for people with disability and make the systems better. So I'm going to play a short video from her, and I realised I didn't have my clicker, so I'm going to walk over here to do that.
Okay, so stay where you're at.
Only place you need to go to.
I'm with you.
She shared her story just a few weeks ago before embarking on her dream adventure across the Grand Canyon. Her mission, travel the canyon as a voice for others living with a disability.
If we're ever going to see the cultural and social change that we want in the world, we need to have these beacons.
Keep moving.
She feeds off of breaking any type of stigma, whether it's related to women or disabilities, and then proving them wrong.
I unfortunately have this drive behind me to push adrenaline through my veins to keep going.
These are the steepest steps.
Steady.
In 89 days, or 53 days, 28 days to go until I and a group of wranglers, rafters, and a film crew take off on the south rim of the Grand Canyon for a 12-day expedition. We will cross it on horseback for the first 3 days and then raft along the Colorado River for 150 miles.
We're so close, Cara.
This is a very rare genetic disease. Within 10 to 15 years of its onset, it typically leads to severe incapacity. It's maybe body physically going down, and the ambition and the drive in my advocacy work goes up.
Putting yourself out there, there's always a risk that people aren't going to agree with what you're doing.
Here we go, about 30 seconds, and we're going.
Up and down. But so often we don't even try something because we're afraid.
We're getting ready to drop, Cara.
There she goes.
Grand Canyon doesn't allow for a set plan. It's beautiful, it's wild, a lot can go wrong.
There's a few rapids down here where no matter how good you are, that place will humble you.
You don't realize the limit of what human beings can do unless you're tested. The best way to be a beacon for my community is to have the courage to just be me.
So if you do want to see a full copy of her documentary, you can scan that QR code or you can go to facingthefalls.com. Kariya Khan, when she was 30, got diagnosed with a condition called HIMSS, and this is something which causes muscle wasting. And as she said in her video, within about 15 years, within sort of 10 to 15 years of its onset, it can cause severe sort of muscle wastage to the point where she may not be able to use her legs and arms. But before that, she was always on a journey to make a difference in the world. She always knew from the age of 6 that she wanted to work for the United Nations, and now she just wants to keep doing better. And the reason why she chose to cross the Grand Canyon is she wanted to challenge the conception that having a disability doesn't mean that you are vulnerable, but having a disability means that you are more likely to experience barriers in a world that is not made for you. So there's a quote that she says at the start of her documentary, which is that when you have a voice or a platform that can make a difference in the world, you should do so. And this is something that I strongly stand behind. So I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation that we stand on here today. And I'd like to acknowledge them as the first peoples. Our Aboriginal culture is over 65,000 years old. It is the oldest culture in the world. And we're so lucky to have that knowledge and to have that understanding of the importance of community and stories in everything that we do. So this is me. It's a photo of me standing on top of the Great Wall with my arms outstretched, completely stoked because I had just climbed, I don't even know how many stairs to get up to the top. This was 2019 in about October, so right before COVID. I got in just in time. But this is me in 2021. So only 18 months later, this was the third hospital visit that I'd had in a very short period of time. And this was me about a week out from my first operation. I told work, hey, I think I'm probably going to need about 2 weeks off work. I've just got a bit of pain at the moment. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I'll call you when I'm feeling better. It took me 11 months before I returned to full-time work. It turned out I had stage 4 endometriosis, something which caused severe pain. I was on painkillers for the better period of a year. And then after 3 surgeries, I finally got some pain relief. So here I am standing in front of you today. I'm wearing a blue blazer, a blue vest, some flower pants, some rainbow earrings, and I've got blonde hair. And right now, in this period of my time, I don't feel like I'm vulnerable, but at that point in my life, I was financially vulnerable, I was emotionally vulnerable, and I was physically vulnerable. At any point in time, any of us can become vulnerable, but it's not because of disability, it's because of circumstance and the systems around us. So there's a couple of things I want to understand together. So the first is that inclusive design is not just about accessibility, and this is something that we've heard throughout all the themes of the talks over the last 2 days. It's not about just conformance or compliance. It's not just about disability, it's about inclusion, and that means many different things to many different people. I also want to talk a little bit about the trust pandemic that we find ourselves in. We've heard different themes of cybersecurity starting to creep itself in, and how does cybersecurity actually impact those people that are in those more vulnerable situations that may not have that digital literacy or can be adversely impacted when something goes wrong. And the third thing I want to talk about is designing safe spaces with the community to be able to make this system change and design. So inclusive design is not just about accessibility. So this is a series of images that I looked up on Shutterstock recently to see what the definition of vulnerability, what the concept of vulnerability means in 2025. Now, when I first started doing talks around accessibility and inclusion, I did this same exercise, and the first 15 photos were all women. And they were all women that were either in wheelchairs or rough sleeping. What you can see from these photos today, though, is that the definition's changing. We're starting to see different genders creep in. We're also starting to see cybersecurity. We're starting to see not only homelessness, but frailty and elderly age. And it's starting to get us to think differently about what vulnerability actually means. So how can we define vulnerability? And there was a couple of models that we talked about in terms of different types of vulnerability yesterday. This one probably most aligns to the social model of vulnerability. But this is one that I really like, which is from the International Red Cross Foundation. And it talks about this idea of people experiencing hazards. Now, those hazards could be a man-made hazard, or it could be a natural hazard. So I've recently done a lot of work up in the Northern Rivers where I've been looking at people who've experienced floods and fires and understanding how we could have supported them better, both before, during and after that natural disaster. A man-made hazard can be someone experiencing unemployment, someone experiencing discrimination. But what makes someone vulnerable is then their ability to cope with those hazards. And if someone doesn't have a support network, that may reduce their ability to cope. If someone comes from a systemically discriminated community group, they live in a regional area, they're experiencing financial hardship, that may experience that capacity to cope. So how do we combine those things together to understand what vulnerability actually means? So I like to think about it as people experiencing vulnerability, there is a set of underrepresented voices who are more likely to be vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is actually a word of power. I know there's sort of mixed opinions as to whether or not we should be using that. I think we should use it in the right context, because if we understand vulnerability, we can then design the systems for it. So the first two types of vulnerability, we've got physical disability and ill physical health. We've also got mental ill health. We've got cognitive differences, neurodiversity, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, culturally and linguistically diverse communities. We've got gender inclusivity and LGBTQIA+. And we've also got age diversity. But this is a non-exhaustive list. And again, just because someone might fit in one of these groups does not mean that they're vulnerable, but it means that we need to design the system to support these people because they're more predisposed to need additional support. So there are different circumstances that can contribute to vulnerability on top of different types of community groups. So this is a graph that was done by the Scanlon Institute, and they asked people, what is the #1 problem that is facing Australia today? Now, what you'll see is that big yellow line, no surprises. Does anyone want to guess what that is? I think it's about 2020, COVID. I'm assuming you all guessed that one. But we've actually got this black line, which is fastly creeping up almost to the same level as what COVID was, and that is unemployment. So the unemployment rate or concern of unemployment is significantly rising. And then what you're also seeing underneath is some of these pattern trends which are correlated that are starting to rise with it. So things like loss of housing. And so all of these circumstances are creating this additional vulnerability in our communities. So what can we do about it? We know that there is inequality in the system, right? There is different resources that are distributed unequally across Australia and across the world. Equality is about distributing those resources, but what happens if those resources can't actually affect change because we need more resources in one area in order to stop some of the systemic vulnerability that those communities might have had. And actually in this area, they're doing okay and they probably don't need as much support. So that's where we start to talk about equity. It's actually those custom tools that can start to bridge that gap. Where we're going to get to though is justice. And so justice is not just about fixing the system, it's about correcting the system so that it can continue on the right path and give people the same level of access and opportunity. So the number of people with disability is increasing year on year. So in Australia, we've got 5.5 million people that are currently experiencing disability. And of that, 20% have a profound impairment. That is significant. But the thing that worries me the most is actually the number of people who have a disability that don't have an education, that don't have employment. What can we do about that? That is the gap that we need to change. There's also a number of people with vulnerability that are increasing year on year. So there's 125,000 people that are currently homeless. But the percentage of people who are rough sleeping is rising. It went up 33% in the last year. What are we doing about it? And this becomes even worse for the groups that we saw previously who are more systemically vulnerable. 1 in 3 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders over the age of 15 have experienced homelessness in their lifetime. 1 in 3. What we also know is that the rate of mental health is rising. So 70% of GPs in a recent survey said that mental health was the primary condition that people were coming to them for. So now that you've got a bit of an understanding around what vulnerability is, how we need to think differently about accessibility, we now need to think about how we can start to remove their barriers. So I'm going to tell you a story of someone I met when I was doing some research up in Queensland. And I got the fantastic opportunity to meet this teacher. And he was telling me his story. So he's a wheelchair user. He went in for a routine knee replacement. He was quite a sporty person growing up, and within 5 days of having this routine knee replacement, he was amputated above both knees with a staph infection. Now, this person, when I met him, was the most positive person you will ever meet. He was absolutely phenomenal. I saw him help an elderly lady with her grocery bags. He does not see himself as someone with a disability. But we decided to catch the bus together to go to his local school, and he refused to take his wheelchair onto this bus. He decided that he wanted to walk on his stumps 200 metres up a hill to the bus stop to be able to board this bus. When I asked him why, because I could see he was in a little bit of pain, he said that when he hopped on the bus, there was a regulation that meant he had to be chained when he hopped onto that bus. He was chained on. He said that was the only time he felt like he had a disability. Now, those rules have since changed, which is great, and it means that he can now freely ride the bus in his wheelchair and not feel like he has a disability. So what can we do, considering everything we know about people's circumstances, in order to design the system? So there's a bit of a framework I like to think about, and it sort of goes back to that definition we saw earlier, which is what is people's level of resilience versus people's exposure to hazards. And so at any point in time, the general population can sort of float between having different levels of exposure to hazards, different levels of resilience. And there's only sort of a small percentage that will stay in this empowered bucket. The reality is that most people will end up in this sort of cycle. And so what you see here is an empowered bucket, but you also see at risk and coping. Coping being people who have gone through hardship and are now trying to overcome it. And that is all cyclical. And if we don't support people who are at risk to move back into empowered and support people who are coping to stay in coping and not go back into hardship, it means that they're going to be in this constant cycle. And so the number one thing we need to do is make sure we're designing for every point in the spectrum in our designs. So we're in a trust pandemic and it's targeting the vulnerable. So one of the things we need to consider is some of the trust issues which are causing people to not trust communication, causing people to not reach out and get support. And a couple of those things are communication, but also cybersecurity. So Australia's Trust Index, so this is something that has been calculated by the Scanlon Institute. I know we just had a mathematics presentation yesterday, so I'm not going to go into the ways that this is calculated, but essentially they've come up with this index. It's quite robust, and it calculates people's level of trust. Now, Australia's level of trust, it's quite high in services like policing, but it's very, very low when you start to get into things like government, and especially when you start to get into things like social media. To me, social media being so low on the trust scale is really, really concerning, because when we did a recent survey, this was the number one way that people received information, yet the trust level is sitting only at 8%. So this lack of trust, it's preventing those meaningful connections that are happening digitally. And it's also increasing this loneliness pandemic that we find ourselves in, and it's a social and public health crisis. So Australia has the third lowest trust in media out of and information out of 28 countries that take part in this survey. And again, for the mathematicians in the room, that is not meant to add up to 100. This is a relative scale that is compared against previous years to give a score as to what level of trust or level of misinformation people currently experience. So here we see there's a high level of misinformation and people feel that businesses are not going far enough to address each issue. There's also a high level of grievance around the level of discrimination that people experience. And this, again, is one of the lowest out of all of the countries that were surveyed. So there needs to be more inclusive, community-led communication in order to build trust. So 31.5% of Australia's population were born overseas. And in the recent census survey, we found out that 870,000 people reported that they don't speak English well or don't speak English at all. Yet when I was doing some research with emergency services, we did a survey and 46% of emergency services staff said they didn't think communication was accessible. So again, let me put this into a bit of a story for you. Has anyone been to Taree? Looking at Ash in the front row. Yeah, there's a couple. Fantastic. For those that haven't been to Taree, that's where my family's from. It is about 4 hours out of Sydney, up the coast of Australia. Taree recently had one of its worst flooding events in history. So the Manning River in Taree, which is what you're seeing up on the screen at the moment, it generally sits just over sort of a metre high. In 2 days, it got over 6.7 metres high. Now, the impact of this, if I go back to the example I was sharing earlier, around communication. When I went up there to speak to people who had been caught in these floods, I heard the story of two brothers that were from Papua New Guinea. They'd recently moved to the area, and when they moved to the area, they'd experienced a flood within the first 2 weeks of living there. They couldn't speak English. They didn't know who to contact. They didn't know where to go. And so they had to resort to phoning their uncle, who still lived overseas, to ask him where they should go and what they needed to do. We need to do better. I'll give you a bit of a comparison so you can see what the water levels looks like and just how fast this actually rose. And the thing is, it's not just about the accessibility of information, it's the trust in information. So there was also issues that we were experiencing with Bureau of Meteorology where there was mixed sort of signals and warnings around whether or not people needed to evacuate. My own cousin was caught in the floods. She had 2 kids and her husband with her, and she had to evacuate on an oyster boat from the 2nd story of her house because the floodwaters were rising so quickly they couldn't wait for the helicopter to evacuate them. So what are some of the other things that are affecting us in this trust pandemic? One of the things we have heard a little bit about is the cybersecurity crisis that we find ourselves in. So $174 million has been lost to scams just in 2025 alone. 5,000 victims were identified and contacted by the AFP as being the subject of romance scams from the Yahoo boys. And I'll explain a little bit about who they are in the moment. But again, what we're seeing is an increase in people who have got vulnerable circumstances who are experiencing these types of scams. So we've got 44% of people who don't speak English as a second language increase in scams compared to the previous year. We've got a 55% increase in scam reports for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders involved in scams. So the Yahoo boys, has anyone heard of them? Quick show of hands, a couple of people. So the Yahoo boys, they started based out of Nigeria. They're actually one of the largest crime syndicates in the world today. And basically what they do is they operate out of internet cafes, and primarily they use social media in order to target people and build a relationship with them. And the number one audience that they have are actually people in the younger demographic. And so one of the things that I learned recently, I was at the I Catch Killers podcast at South by Southwest, is that the way that they engage in this conversation is something that a lot of people fall into the trap of because it is so colloquial. And they'd actually put this to the test. They got one of these scammers, or so they thought, on the other end of the line, and they tried to see what this conversation would look like. So it starts with, hey, how are you? What school do you go to? What do your parents do? And then they ask WDYLL. Does anyone know what that stands for? It stands for what do you look like? Now from there, all it takes is someone to send through a photo for them to then start to ask for more. Hey, we've got this amazing bikini line that we think you'd be great to show off. Any chance you can send us a photo of you in a bikini? Hey, we think you'd be a really good fit for this local gym brand that we're about to promote. Any chance you can send us a photo with your shirt off at the gym? Regardless of whether or not these photos are sent, they do have deep fake generators and they'll create explicit pictures which they then use in order to extort people out of money. Now again, I did say some of the themes in this talk can be quite confronting, so if you do need to step out at any point in time, please do. But one of the things that really got me thinking we need to do better in this space was hearing that there were 50 young boys who are under the age of 18 who chose to take their own lives because they were the subject of romance scams in the last 2 years. So what can we do about it? So there's this really good framework. I learned about it when I was working with Australian Red Cross, which is called Mastering Vulnerability. So it's a framework by Glover and Hodges. It's not new. It's been around for quite a while. But what they talk about is that anytime we engage with vulnerable people, anytime we're engaging with systems that might involve vulnerable people, we can't just take from them when we're asking for research and insights. What we need to do is be able to give back to them. And so some of the ways that we can give back to them is learning with and from each other. It's helping them master vulnerability in their own story. It's sharing an experience. And so we heard a little bit about today, like what is the one thing we could do if we had a bit more time because of AI? Go out there, educate people, spread awareness. That's the thing that's going to make some of the biggest difference. So the third thing that I want to talk about is some quick tips and tricks around how we can create safe spaces for engaging with people from the community. So someone talked a little bit about in the branding presentation that we saw earlier that they didn't want to have the same people associated with their brand. And I was typing in sort of different stock images to see what I could use for the talk. And this woman kept coming up. So she's amazing. She's blonde hair, she's got a denim jacket, a headband, glasses. She's a doctor, she's a gym instructor, she's a cafe worker. She does everything. But the problem with stock images is almost like the same as the problem with research. We keep going out to the same people. And if we go out to the same people, we're going to get the same answers to the same problems. So who are your real users and how can we actually engage them? So there's a couple of things that you can do in your co-design frameworks which are going to help you think differently about engaging your users. It's not just about running workshops, conducting interviews, doing surveys. It's actually getting out there in the community. So I like to, anytime I do research, connect with the local Aboriginal corporation or the land council, and I'll see if I can get an elder or an uncle and auntie to allow me to participate in a community session or get them to facilitate a yarning circle so I can hear from members of the community. The other things that I'll do are community drop-ins and intercept interviews, where it might be that I just go to the local pub, I go to the library and I say, hey, I'm going to be here from this time to this time if anyone wants to come and chat. Mind you, I did this up at Tumbolgan Pub, and I ended up with about 30 people out the door because I was buying free beer. So I've now reverted to doing it in a library with a $10 Coles gift card instead. So consider your users' needs when you are doing this process, because doing this, you can get into the most vulnerable people in the community who may never have shared their story before. And so this is a really quick cheat sheet that I found. I really like it. So this is from a Safe Space Workplace. And you can either have this, if people are feeling a little bit nervous, you can say, hey, here's some questions for you to think about before you share your story. Or if I know that I'm about to participate in some workshops or research, we've got a lot of different people in the room, I say, hey, here's some quick tips to think about so you feel prepared. So as designers and as developers, engineers, leaders, everyone who sort of sits in this room, we're in this weird position of power. Rightfully or wrongfully, we're making decisions on behalf of our users, and sometimes those decisions work and sometimes they don't. And so we need to be really cognizant of those decisions that we're making and that we're not causing any bias. So one of the other activities that I really like to do is something called the power flower. And so the way that this works is you imagine drawing a flower. So you've got a circle in the middle, you put someone's name, and then you draw the petals around the outside. And now each of these petals will have different things that might negotiate different levels of power. So say, for example, I'm coming up with some ideas or a system or a website in order to help unemployment. Now, if some of the petals have got a level of education, some of the petals have got current employment, there's going to be different levels of power in that room depending on where that sits. And so I get people to do this activity and I sort of customize each of the petals depending on the subject that I'm dealing with. And if they feel comfortable, I'll get them to share that with the rest of the room. And this creates something really, really powerful because you'll have people that recognize there are others with different experiences and they'll invite them to speak. But it's also a really good exercise to do with your research teams, your product teams, your tech teams, to get them to understand what their own biases might be as well. So the focus of human-centered design has changed. We started with human-centered design, we're putting ourselves in the user's shoes, we're starting with common needs. Then we went into, all right, great, we're going to do universal design. And we started to talk about how we can bring accessibility into that to make sure we're designing for more diverse needs rather than just the common need. But what we've actually started to move to is this idea of inclusive design, these intersectional circumstances that make people human. And it's not just about accessibility, it's about everything that people experience. So some other quick tips and tricks. I'm not going to go through all of these, so if you want to take a photo, you can. I'll also be sharing a copy of these slides online, but I will just briefly read them out. So engage lived experience and lived expertise. Understand if ethics approval is required early. Use strengths-based practices. Align on early signs of distress. Establish clear escalation pathways. This is a must-have. So have a think about if anyone in the room does feel a little bit vulnerable or triggered after sharing their story. Ideally, you want to try and put things in place so that doesn't happen. But if it does, what are you going to do in order to support them? Conduct research in a safe environment. Make research accessible for all users. Practice research in pairs where possible. This helps you practice self-care. And most importantly, follow through with what their impact is. So for people that have participated, taken the time, they've shared their story, the number one thing that you can do for them is communicate how their story made a difference. So let's be more than human-centered designers. I want us to move from inclusive designers, universal designers, and I want us to be designing for humanity. So going back to the quote that we had from Karya Khan, if we are in a position of power, if we have a platform that can make a difference, we should be trying to make change. And so this might have been a photo that a few of you have seen before. This is a photo that someone posted on LinkedIn a few years ago where they'd redesigned the remote for their parents that had dementia. We shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to be creating these workarounds in our system. The system should just work right from the start. So how are we going to do it for the better of humanity? I have got a 2-minute video, but I've only got one more slide. Have I got 2 minutes? Yep, okay, great, amazing. We're going to finish with Brian. So Brian is someone who has ALS. So ALS is something which affects the neurons in your brain, and it can come on quite quickly. So it starts with losing feeling in your legs. It then moves to losing feeling in your arms, and then it can affect your ability to speak. And the reason why I really want to share Brian's story is he has used technology in order to improve his life and be able to use his voice again. And so, yes, it's been quite a heavy sort of talk in terms of the different circumstances and things that are facing us in the world today. But we're in a position where we can really make a difference with the tools at our disposal. So let's hear from Brian.
Today we're going to play like a newer version of your voice. And I'm hoping when you hear this, and when you hear this, it's going to remind you a little bit more of what he sounded like beforehand. So you just choose any phrase and then I'll play it on here as well.
Hey beautiful people, I am so happy to be with all of you.
All right, I'm going to type it out.
Hey beautiful people, I am so happy to be with all of you.
Dang!
Hey Christy, I love you.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe that, really. Like, that's really crazy.
The biggest opportunities when it comes to emerging technologies is the gap that it can fill, not just here for people with ALS, but you think about anybody whose speech is affected. AI has the ability to increase communication, increase independence. It's the next wave for accessibility.
So you already know about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but they're not going to help you help people like Brian. So what I want you to start to think about is 2 more guidelines. So today we covered inclusive and trustworthy. It's been through the theme of everyone's talks that you've heard today. And I want you to start adding that into your toolkit and thinking about how you can start to bring that into every day and how you practice accessibility. So thank you. If you would like to get access, I did a talk a few years ago where we created a version of Pour It, which is essentially adding on inclusive and trustworthy onto the WCAG guidelines. And if you'd like a copy, please feel free to scan the QR code or you can contact me on LinkedIn. So that's Natasha Ballantyne, and I'd be more than happy to send that through to you. You can also schedule 30 minutes with me should you like to chat about anything that I've shared in the talk today, but hopefully that resonates with you. And thank you. Let's make humanity a better place.
Alley Camp, celebrating 10 years.